welcome to Robbie and James Talk Music, the podcast where Robbie and James talk music. We're your hosts, Robbie Maxted, a creative writing professor.
And I'm James Wicks, a professor of media and film studies.
This week's episode, we're focusing on melancholy songs. And I think, James, you're kicking us off, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think I'm curious to learn more about your experience with sad and melancholy songs. I think for me, I have so many to choose from. I went through a list that included Loverboy by Miserable, The Night We Met by Lord Huron, Queens of the Stone Age's song called Vampire of Time and Memory, On the Floor by Brandon Flowers, all the songs by The Cure. I could keep going on and on. But I'm going to roll with Tracy Chapman's Fast Car from 1988.
You got a fast car. We go cruise and entertain ourselves. Still ain't got a job. Now work in the market as a checkout girl. I know things will get better.
Great track, James. I feel like tonally, this one is a fit. It just has that, I don't know, just a vibe where it's slow, consistent, beautiful song, but it does make you feel kind of down listening to it.
Yeah, and it was interesting to go through the process of preparing for this podcast because I kept thinking about how optimistic or at least how the chorus itself is trying to look back on a time when things had a lot of positivity or the whole world seems to be before the speaker of this song. And remembering then when things were good, and made me think so much about contrast there because she doesn't sugarcoat during the verses how things are going on in the interim, right? There's a line towards the end of the song, I'd always hope for better. But then when that's contrasted with this feeling that she could be someone, it's that disparity and contrast that really stood out to me. And as we're thinking about this podcast in relation to our occupations and professions, it made me think a lot about photography as well, because good photographs are composed via contrast. And I think it's really a mark of a lot of amateur cinema. And as we're, teaching young filmmakers how to create content, I think that's something they miss. They want to focus only on the melancholy, or they only want to focus on the positive. But this song shows that by doing both, it really pulls me apart as a listener, from 8th grade hearing this for the first time in 1988 to now, the song just always works and communicates. And then even though it has those pulls of disparity, it does, I agree with you, Robbie, it totally lands on the melancholy at the end of the day.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting contrast even in that first bit of lyrics at the start of the song. It's grounded in present, but looking ahead to the future, hoping for a better future.
Correct.
But then also looking back, like you were saying.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting sort of point of view shifting going on in the lyrics.
Yeah, for sure. And as you move all the way through the song, that memory and recollection of when the whole world is before her is it gains more traction and momentum as a song goes through, all the way to the progression to the end. This was Tracy Chapman's first single, and it's remarkable. It made it to number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100, right from the start of her career. It's been covered by numerous artists, including Luke Combs. And again, just thinking about this in relation to our podcast, it made me think about contrast in cinema as well. One of my favorite movies that I think does this so well is Wong Kar-wai's In the Mood for Love. And that's a film that works via contrast in terms of who it represents. So in that particular film, the protagonist, the two main characters, Mr. Chan and Miss Chan, and Mr. Cho, they are given screen time and they're represented. But meanwhile, their unfaithful spouses, they don't get any screen time. You only see them in profile or in silhouette or from the back. You never see their faces. And again, that's just a strategy that makes that film so powerful, again, using this concept of contrast. And I love how it works lyrically in Tracy Chapman's song, which I totally adore, and trying to think through other examples filmically that contrast is used so powerfully. And I really can't think of a better example than In the Mood for Love.
Yeah, you're describing such an interesting visual contrast there.
Yeah.
So yeah, interesting to think about how this sort of tone is created in a film versus a song.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think there's so many ways you can think about it. In photography, it might be through, I love black and white photography, just because of that spectrum. And when I shoot documentaries, I love to shoot interview subjects. I like to present it in black and white for that same reason. So you have that contrast and really allow the speaker that's being interviewed to describe that gray area between those pole positions, right? Whether it's, in the case of In the Mood for Love, it's like love and like destructive relationships. Those positions can be between the ethical and the unethical. But in terms of color, you have the black to the white. So I just love how the contrast can present a story and give us the just the way that we need to position ourselves as audience and as also as a creator to convey the story and position it correctly. And then again, coming back to Tracy Chapman, the place where she manages that focal point in her lyrics and delivery, it always gets me.
Cool. Yeah, so it's a great track. How often do you listen to music that's melancholy?
Yeah, I actually have it pretty frequently on rotation. I think that one thing that's very comforting about melancholy and sad songs is there's very little ambiguity.
Sure.
And you know exactly where they're going. And I think there's a comfort in that. Tom York, the lead singer from Radiohead, has famously made an impassioned defense of sad and melancholy songs. And he thinks that it's really healthy to be able to go to those places, because if a culture is unwilling to go there, then we're losing part of our human experience.
Yep.
And so I think it's not a genre, obviously, as you and I chatted before the podcast, but it's a emotion that I think is really important. I think the older I get, the less I need to stay there. I kind of know where it's going, and I don't need to linger so long. I think as a younger person, I would stay there for a week or two,
Yeah.
And then now I know what that's like, and I appreciate it, but I don't stay there for the same duration that I used to. And so I think that's just something I've been learning a lot about lately.
Cool.
So, hey, I love chatting about Tracy Chapman's track here. What do you have for us today, Robbie?
Yeah, my track that's melancholy is from the band Doug, D-U-G. Their first album, which came out pretty recently, September 19th, 2025. The album's called Have At It. We've played them on the pod previously, and this song is called In Memoriam.
I was whistling past the grave of old Tom Paine, when I heard my mother call my name.
Robbie, I love the simple instrumentation of this track. I know you're going to explain a little bit further about how you know one of the musicians. And so by simple instrumentation, let's be clear, I'm just, it's a masterclass far beyond my skill level. But just in terms of the sonic delivery, it has this deceptively simple melody and sound that we experience as it's transferred to us. As I'm thinking through both the Irish as well as Americana roots of this, I see on the Irish side a kind of loss and longing.
Sure.
And then on the Americana side, there's a lonesome feel, there's haunting harmonies. Definitely fits into the emotion that we're tapping into in today's podcast.
Yeah. When I heard it for the first time, it's one of those songs where you just get like chills because of how beautiful it is. And yeah, I think it's grappling with loss, but also like looking ahead to the future, kind of like Chapman's does with that refrain about flying home. So yeah, just a gorgeous song, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a kind of, I think in Americana, sad music, melancholy music, there's also a resistance somehow in the fiercely independent nature of the artist in the face of this loss. And So somewhere along the line, that's woven through this track as well, which I'd be curious to hear how you've interpreted that.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting because it's moving through different people in the family, but then there's also like that parallel with community toward the beginning when he's talking about communist bees in a hive, like sharing space equally. So yeah, I don't know. There is that tension in this track as well. I also think it's interesting because in the whole album, like all of the other tracks have much more upbeat vibe, much more fluorescence musically. And I think that this one is just so toned back compared to the rest of the album. So it's sort of fascinating also that it's, I'd say about 2/3 of the way through. So it feels like perfectly placed in the album. Just a brilliant album. Everyone should check it out. It's, I think right now, number 40 on the Irish charts, which is kind of cool. One of the duo for this band is my friend Eddie Matthews, our friend Eddie Matthews, his good buddy Johnny Pickett, who James and we've seen in concert together. Yep. So it's kind of cool to see him teaming up here with Connor Lorcan O'Reilly, who's Irish, and then moved to New York. And then I think they formed the band over in Ireland. It's been fun watching Johnny kind of thrive over there, which is cool. They're currently on a global tour, which is also fun to watch. I wanted to touch on, as you were talking earlier about Tom York's sort of defense of sad songs. It made me think of an essay by Ander Monson called The Sadnesses of March. I've previously talked about the March Madness style essay tournament that Ander organizes every year. But he wrote an essay sort of toward the beginning of forming that essay tournament because I think it was the first tournament was focused on sad songs. Brilliant essay. We'll link to it in the episode description. But he starts out with the question, why listen to sad music if it makes one feel sad? And that's something I was thinking about leading up to this episode because most of the bands I listen to on the day-to-day, The National, Bon Iver, Sufjan Stevens, like those are all artists who people kind of think of as sad, and yet I don't really feel sad when I'm listening to their music somehow. So yeah, I don't know what it is, like why I'm drawn to that sort of sonic space, even though I don't feel down when I'm listening to it. But that is, I think, where I kind of gravitate toward musically.
Yeah, and I was curious, as you were talking earlier, Robbie, about how, this album by Doug is primarily filled with more upbeat, to use your term, fluorescent tracks, and yet you were drawn to this one specifically. And it works, to using the term contrast again with the other songs on the album. I was wondering, as an essay writer, and I know you're working on essay collections, do you similarly have a tonal shift in an essay or two that seem to counterbalance the rest of the collection as a whole? Like, do you think of your essay collection similar to how a Melancholy track may or may not fit into a larger collection of songs on an album?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think the larger collection that I'm working on about Jerusalem's archaeology, like I'm thinking about overall tone. Like I have some essays that are like real funny. I don't think I have as many sad essays yet. Like I think the book's going that direction just because of the political mess that's taking place at the site and how that impacts people on the day-to-day. So I think there will be sad ones towards the end. But I think that humor towards the beginning, when I'm just looking at the absurdity of imperialism mixed into early archaeology and like the mistakes that people were making, I think it sort of contrasts across the project in an interesting way. So yeah, it is something that I'm going to have to think about once I'm actually laying out the project as a whole.
Yeah, that's really cool. And the way you responded to that question actually helped me have an inroad into what you were saying earlier as well about how you might be attracted to this kind of music or the way that this kind of music is perceived by other people, but it doesn't make you feel sad. I think that for me, I think that if there's a kind of baseline between being optimistic or pessimistic, or there's, this baseline between happiness and sadness. I do think the music puts me below that line. Like I'm closer. I flatline beneath the zero and more in the sad space when I listen to this kind of music. But I also enjoy being in that like sadder space. And again, I don't like drop precipitously, but I'm just right below the median.
Sure.
And then, I'm quick to laugh, and you and I always joke around. So it's not that I'm going to be morose and unwilling to be shifted away from that. But I think if I'm listening to this kind of music, I go right below that baseline and I just kind of flatline there. So I think it's a comfortable space for me. So I don't think of myself really as being sad, to use your term.
Yeah.
But I do think that I would have to, that's how I'd position myself as I'm thinking about it now.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. I think baseline, I'm just pretty optimistic and happy all the time.
Yeah, I think so.
So it is interesting that that's kind of the music that I tend to listen to.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know what to make of that. I'll have to think about it more.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, thanks so much for listening, y'all. Appreciate your contributions. Also want to thank Danny Martinez for producing this podcast as always. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, everyone.